The salvage ship drifted slowly through the empty space at the edge of what was once called the Orion Arm. Its lights cut through the darkness, illuminating floating debris and ancient metal fragments. Captain Olivia Clark stood at the viewing port, her eyes fixed on the massive structure that loomed before them. "Have you ever seen anything like this, Henry?" she asked, not taking her eyes off the site. Henry Gardner, the senior archaeologist for the Galactic Council's Historical Preservation Division, shook his head. His gray hair caught the blue light from the ship's controls as he studied the readings on his tablet. "No, this is unlike any human relic we found before." Henry's voice was quiet with awe. "It's at least 400,000 years old, but the metal shows almost no decay." The structure before them was enormous, a floating station of some kind, dark except for tiny lights that had begun to blink when their ship approached. It was clearly of human design, with the angular shapes and sturdy build that marked human architecture before their disappearance. "The Council will want a full report," said Olivia. "They've always treated humans as a footnote in galactic history, just another species that reached the stars and then vanished." Henry nodded as he gathered his tools. "That's why we need to be the first inside. This could change everything we know about them." Their small shuttle docked against the ancient station with a soft thud. The airlock, remarkably, still functioned. Air tests showed the atmosphere inside was thin but breathable. Henry went first, his steps careful on the metal floor that hadn't felt weight in thousands of centuries. "Look at these markings," Olivia said, shining her light on the walls. "Some kind of human military symbols." Henry ran his fingers over the faded emblems. "I think this was a defense outpost. See these shapes? They match fragments of human combat vessels we found near Earth." They moved deeper into the station, their footsteps echoing in halls that had been silent for longer than most current galactic species had existed. The lights in the ceiling flickered weakly to life as they passed, responding to their movement. "The power systems are still working," Henry whispered in disbelief. "How is that possible after all this time?" They reached what appeared to be a control room. Dusty screens lined the walls, and a central platform rose from the floor. When Olivia stepped onto it, the entire room suddenly hummed to life. Screens lit up with symbols, and a soft blue light began to glow from the ceiling. "I didn't touch anything," Olivia said, stepping back quickly. The blue light grew brighter and formed into a shape, a three-dimensional image of a human in what appeared to be a military uniform. "Identification required," the image said in an ancient human language that their translators struggled to process. "Access to military installation 7 Delta unauthorized without proper clearance." Henry stepped forward. "We are representatives of the Galactic Council. This installation has been dormant for over 400,000 years. Human civilization as you knew it no longer exists." A hologram flickered. Statement analyzed. Verification needed. If human civilization has fallen, Emergency Protocol Lazarus will be initiated. "Wait," Olivia said quickly. "What is Protocol Lazarus?" Instead of answering, the hologram disappeared. Red lights began to flash throughout the station, and a low alarm sounded. "We need to leave," Henry said, grabbing Olivia's arm. "Now." They ran back toward their shuttle, but before they reached it, heavy metal doors slid shut, blocking their path. Behind them, they heard the sound of machines powering up, systems awakening after an impossibly long sleep. "Henry," Olivia whispered, "what have we done?" A new voice spoke from the walls around them. "Beginning system-wide scan. Detecting Galactic Council presence. No human government signals found. No Earth defense network detected." There was a pause. "Initiating Lazarus Protocol. All fleet bases alert. Awakening sequence commencing in 3, 2, 1. Throughout the station, lights blazed to full brightness. The floor beneath them vibrated as ancient engines roared to life. And far away, in the darkness of unexplored space, something vast and powerful began to stir. The last defense of humanity had just woken up. The news spread quickly through the Galactic Council. On the capital world of Nexus Prime, the grand meeting hall buzzed with worried voices. 27 different species gathered around the circular table, their faces showing various signs of concern. Counselor Alan Morris stood at the center, his tall Procyon frame rigid with tension. As the Council's leading expert on extinct civilizations, all eyes turned to him for answers. "What exactly are we dealing with?" asked the Tauran representative, her scaled hands spread wide on the table. Alan activated the holographic display. 12 hours ago, we lost contact with a research team investigating the human relic. Since then, we've detected energy signatures activating across the galaxy. All of them are of human origin. The display showed blinking red dots scattered across the star map. Each dot represented a human artifact or installation suddenly coming to life after hundreds of thousands of years. Diane Peterson, the Council's chief scientist, stepped forward. Her voice was steady, but her hand shook slightly as she pointed to the largest concentration of signals. "The most worrying activity is here, in Sector DS-349. It was empty space, or so we thought. Now our sensors show something massive unfolding there." In the back of the room, a door slid open. A breathless messenger hurried to Alan's side and whispered in his ear. Alan's eyes widened. "I've just been informed that the artifacts in our museums are also activating. The human chip engine in the Grand Museum of Nexus Prime just powered up. It's broadcasting some kind of signal." Panic rippled through the assembly. The Arcturus delegate stood up. "We must destroy these artifacts before they pose a greater threat." "No." Alan's voice cut through the noise. "We don't know what we're dealing with. Hasty action could make things worse." At that moment, the main screen lit up with an urgent message. The face of Henry Gardner appeared, his expression grim. "Counselor Morris, we're still trapped inside the human station. The system is scanning all of Council space. It keeps saying it can't find any human signals or civilizations." Henry looked over his shoulder nervously. "It's called the Lazarus Protocol. We think it's some kind of emergency system designed to activate if humanity was in danger of extinction." Alan felt a chill run down his spine. "What exactly is happening there, Henry?" "The station is fully operational now. It's sending out signals to other installations. And—" Henry paused, his voice dropping lower. "It's preparing something. We can see through the viewing ports. There's something enormous moving out there in the darkness." The transmission suddenly cut off. The Council chamber fell silent. Diane checked her instruments. Energy readings from Sector DS-349 just spiked off the charts. Whatever's happening there, it's accelerating. Alan made his decision. "Prepare a diplomatic vessel. I'll go myself to investigate DS-349. If this is truly some kind of human defense system, we need to understand its purpose." "And if it's a weapon?" asked the Tauran representative. Alan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew that if humanity's ancient military might was awakening, the current balance of power in the galaxy could be shattered in an instant. Far away, in the depths of Sector DS-349, something amazing was happening. A massive structure, hidden in folded space for hundreds of thousands of years, was expanding. Inside, row after row of sleek warships sat in silent formation. Their hulls gleamed as if they had been built yesterday, not eons ago. In the central chamber of the hidden shipyard, a stasis pod hissed open. Inside, a woman with streaks of gray in her dark hair opened her eyes for the first time in 470,000 years. Admiral Susan Rivera took a deep breath of recycled air as the medical systems checked her vital signs. A calm voice spoke from all around her. "Welcome back, Admiral. The Lazarus Protocol has been activated. Humanity is in danger. The fleet awaits your command." Susan sat up slowly, her mind racing to absorb what this meant. If Lazarus had activated, something had gone terribly wrong with humanity, and she and her sleeping fleet were the last line of defense. "Status report," she ordered, her voice rough from centuries of disuse. "Where are my people? What happened to Earth?" The answer would change the fate of the galaxy forever. Admiral Susan Rivera stood in the command center of the massive shipyard, her eyes taking in screens filled with information. After the medical team had cleared her, she had dressed in her uniform, still perfect after all this time. The fabric felt strange against her skin after so long in stasis. "Atlas, give me a complete situation report," she ordered. The AI's voice was calm and clear. The Lazarus Protocol was triggered 14 hours ago when a non-human vessel made contact with Outpost 7 Delta. Initial scans confirmed the complete absence of human civilization signals throughout mapped space. Susan frowned. "That's impossible. Our projections showed human expansion across at least 3 galactic arms by now. Current data suggests otherwise, Admiral. The only human presence detected consists of archaeological sites and museum artifacts." Susan moved to the large viewing window. Outside, she could see hundreds of warships, destroyers, cruisers, and massive dreadnoughts, all coming to life. Lights flickered on along their hulls as automated systems ran diagnostics. These ships represented the peak of human military technology from her time, hidden away as a last resort. "What about Earth?" she asked quietly. Atlas paused. "Earth shows signs of recovery from past civilization, but no current technology beyond primitive levels. It appears to have been resettled by non-human species." Susan closed her eyes for a moment. The weight of what she was hearing pressed down on her. Humanity. Gone. Their homeworld. Taken by aliens. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was clear. "Show me these Galactic Council species," she said. The screens filled with images of various aliens, some humanoid, others wildly different. Text scrolled beside each image, describing their biology, technology level, and history. 27 spacefaring civilizations form the current power structure, Atlas explained. Most achieved interstellar travel long after human civilization's apparent collapse. Susan studied the information carefully. "And none of them know what happened to us. According to intercepted communications, humans are considered a minor footnote in galactic history, a species that briefly achieved interstellar capability before mysteriously vanishing." A warning light flashed on the console. "Admiral, we have detected an approaching vessel. Council markings. Likely a diplomatic mission based on their communications." Susan straightened her uniform. "How long until our fleet is fully operational?" "Main battle group will be ready in 6 hours. Full fleet operational in 24. Prepare a small escort of 4 destroyers. I want to meet these council representatives personally." Her voice hardened. "And continue scanning for any sign of human survivors. They must be out there somewhere." In another part of the shipyard, the awakening process continued. Automated factories hummed to life, beginning to produce supplies and ammunition. Robots moved efficiently along corridors, checking systems that had waited in darkness for nearly 500,000 years. In the medical bay, the senior staff was being revived from stasis. Fleet Commander Sam Kelly sat up slowly as the medical officer checked his vitals. "The Lazarus Protocol?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The medical officer nodded. "Admiral Rivera is already awake and in command." Sam looked out the small viewing port beside his bed. "I never thought we'd be needed. I assumed we'd sleep until the power ran out. The designers built this facility to last." The officer replied. "The dimensional fold kept us outside normal spacetime. For us, barely any time has passed." Sam stood carefully, testing his legs. "What about everyone else? Earth? The colonies?" The officer's face showed no emotion. "You should speak with the Admiral about that, sir." Back in the command center, Susan reviewed the fleet manifest. Over 500 warships, each one a marvel of technology that apparently surpassed anything the current galaxy possessed. Plus factories, supplies, weapons, everything needed to fight a war. But who was the enemy? Who had erased humanity from the stars? As the council ship drew closer, Susan made her decision. She would meet these aliens. She would learn what happened to her people. And then, if necessary, she would show the galaxy why humans had been feared and respected in her time. The ancient fleet of humanity was awake, and it demanded answers. Captain Gregory Daniels stood on the bridge of the Council diplomatic vessel Harmony, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture perfect despite the tension that filled the air around him. "Any response to our hails?" he asked his communications officer. "None yet, Captain," she replied. "But our sensors show 4 vessels moving to intercept us. Design unknown." Gregory nodded calmly. In his 30 years of service to the Galactic Council, he had faced many first-contact situations, but this one was different. These weren't new aliens. These were humans, or at least their technology, from a time when the galaxy was young. "All stop," he ordered. "Hold position and continue hailing. Let them make the first move." The Harmony slowed to a halt in space. Ahead, the 4 unknown ships approached in perfect formation. They were sleek and angular, clearly built for speed and combat. Nothing like the rounded, peaceful designs preferred by modern council vessels. "Captain," his science officer called out, "those ships are putting out energy readings far beyond anything in our database. Their weapons systems alone could destroy this entire diplomatic fleet." Gregory kept his face calm despite the news. "They haven't fired yet. That's a good sign." The main screen suddenly flickered. A woman's face appeared, human, with dark hair streaked with gray, wearing what was clearly a military uniform. "This is Admiral Susan Rivera of the Earth Defense Fleet. Identify yourselves and state your purpose." Gregory stepped forward. "I am Captain Gregory Daniels of the Galactic Council diplomatic vessel Harmony. We come in peace to establish communication." Susan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Captain Daniels, our scans show your vessel is crewed by multiple non-human species. Where are the human representatives of this council?" A heavy silence fell on the bridge. Gregory glanced at Counselor Alan Morris, who stepped into view of the communication screen. "Admiral Rivera, I am Counselor Morris of the Procyon species. I must inform you that there are no human representatives in the Galactic Council. According to our historical records, human civilization disappeared approximately 467,000 years ago." Susan's expression didn't change, but her voice grew colder. "Disappeared how, Counselor?" Alan spread his hands. "That remains one of the great mysteries of galactic history. Humans achieved interstellar travel, established a few dozen colonies, and then simply vanished from galactic affairs. By the time the first Council species began deep space exploration, humans were already gone." Susan turned to speak to someone off-screen. When she looked back, her face was hard. "I find that difficult to believe, Counselor. Humanity had established over 200 colonies by the time I entered stasis. We had the largest fleet in known space. We were expanding rapidly." Gregory and Alan exchanged worried glances. "Admiral," Gregory said carefully, "how long have you been in stasis?" "According to our systems, approximately 470,000 years," Susan replied. "We were created as a final defense measure. If humanity ever faced extinction, the Lazarus Protocol would wake us to protect what remained." Alan stepped closer to the screen. "Admiral, I assure you, the Council has no record of any conflict or event that led to humanity's disappearance. There are ruins on Earth and a few former colony worlds, but no sign of warfare or catastrophe. It's as if humans simply faded away." Susan was silent for a long moment. "I request permission to send a shuttle to your vessel for face-to-face discussions. This matter requires more detailed conversation." Gregory nodded. "Granted, Admiral. We welcome you aboard the Harmony." After the communication ended, Alan turned to Gregory. "She doesn't believe us. Would you?" Gregory asked. "She went to sleep as part of the most powerful species in the galaxy. She wakes up, and they're gone." In her command ship, Susan prepared for the meeting. Commander Kelly approached her. "Do you trust them?" he asked quietly. Susan checked her sidearm, making sure it was secure in its holster. "No. But I need information, and they have it." She looked up at the tactical display, showing the positions of her awakening fleet. "If they're lying, or if they had anything to do with what happened to our people, they'll learn why humans were feared in my time." Her shuttle departed, small against the backdrop of her massive warships. The ancient fleet of humanity continued to awaken, weapon systems coming online one by one. The meeting room on the Harmony was large and circular. Susan sat at one side of the table, her back straight, face showing no emotion. Across from her sat Counselor Alan Morris, Captain Gregory Daniels, and Dr. Elizabeth Johnson, the Council's expert on pre-Council civilizations. Susan placed a small device on the table. "This will record our conversation for my fleet," she explained. No one objected. "Admiral Rivera," Dr. Johnson began. She was a tall woman with short blonde hair and kind eyes. "I spent my career studying ancient human artifacts. If I may ask, what was the last major event you remember before entering stasis?" Susan's eyes remained cold. The Orion conflict had just ended. Earth and its colonies were at peace for the first time in decades. The Defense Council decided to create the Lazarus Protocol as an insurance policy against future threats. Elizabeth nodded, taking notes. "There is no record of any Orion conflict in our archives." "Convenient," Susan said flatly. Alan leaned forward. "Admiral, we understand your suspicion, but the Council has no reason to hide human history. In fact, finding you is the most exciting archaeological discovery in centuries." "Archaeological?" Susan's voice sharpened. "We are not artifacts, Counselor." Gregory intervened smoothly. "Of course not, Admiral." Poor choice of words. He slid a data tablet across the table. "These are all the records we have of human civilization. Ruins on Earth, and 12 colony worlds. Some preserved technology in museums. A few intact data archives, mostly corrupted." Susan took the tablet and began to read. As she studied the information, a small light on her uniform began to blink. She touched it discreetly. "If you'll excuse me," she said, standing, "I need to communicate with my ship." They showed her to a private room. Once alone, Susan activated her comlink. "Report," she said quietly. Atlas's voice came through clearly. "Admiral, we've completed an initial scan of the Council's historical database. There are significant inconsistencies. Many records appear to have been altered or deleted approximately 300,000 years ago." Susan frowned. "By whom?" "Unknown. But I found references to a species called the Voidborn who rose to prominence shortly after the time humans allegedly disappeared. They themselves vanished about 290,000 years ago." "Keep digging," Susan ordered. "What about our scout ships to Earth and the colonies?" "The first reports are coming in now. Earth shows signs of having been deliberately abandoned, not destroyed. And we found something unusual on Colony World Epsilon 7. When Susan returned to the meeting room, her face was grim. Dr. Johnson was showing the others something on her screen. "Admiral," Elizabeth said, looking up, "I've been reviewing some anomalies in our historical data. Certain records don't match up with physical evidence we found." Susan sat down slowly. "Go on." Elizabeth turned her screen around. "These are images of human ruins on 3 different worlds. Notice anything strange?" Susan studied the pictures. "The destruction patterns are identical." "Exactly," Elizabeth nodded. "Statistically impossible if they were natural disasters or even normal warfare. Something systematic happened." Alan looked troubled. "Dr. Johnson, what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," Elizabeth said carefully, "that someone deliberately erased humanity from both history and reality." The room fell silent. Susan looked at each of their faces, searching for signs of deception. "My scout ships have found evidence supporting your theory, Doctor. On Epsilon 7, they discovered human remains that show signs of genetic tampering. Someone altered the DNA of at least some human populations. Gregory's eyes widened. Why would anyone do this? Power, Susan said simply. Humanity was expanding rapidly. We had the most advanced fleet in known space. Someone saw us as a threat. Susan stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars and her waiting ships beyond. I believe this species you call the Voidborn didn't just alter records. They systematically undermined human civilization, perhaps through genetic sabotage, technology disruption, or both. She turned back to the group, her eyes now burning with purpose. I need access to all your records about the Voidborn. And I need coordinates for any suspected human colony worlds not in your official records. Alan nodded slowly. You'll have our full cooperation, Admiral. If someone altered our history, the Council needs to know the truth as much as you do. Susan's hand moved to her sidearm, then relaxed. Perhaps not all aliens were enemies after all. The massive human warship cut through space, its engines glowing blue against the darkness. On the bridge, Admiral Susan Rivera stood with her senior officers, studying the star map before them. 3 weeks had passed since their first meeting with the Galactic Council. In that time, they had visited 6 former human worlds, finding only ruins and ghosts. Admiral, we're approaching the coordinates, Commander Kelly reported. Susan nodded. Take us out of faster-than-light travel. Approach with caution. The ship slowed as it entered a system not on any council maps. Ahead lay a small blue-green planet orbiting a yellow star. According to ancient records Ed Lass had recovered, this had once been a secret research outpost, hidden even from most of the human government. Life signs? Susan asked. Yes, the science officer replied, sounding surprised. Human life signs, thousands of them. A murmur ran through the bridge crew. After weeks of finding nothing but ruins, the discovery of living humans was almost too much to hope for. Open a communication channel, Susan ordered. Her voice was steady, but her hands gripped the edge of her command chair tightly. No response to standard signals, the communications officer reported. But I'm picking up radio transmissions from the surface. Very primitive technology. Susan made a quick decision. Prepare a shuttle. Small team only. Myself, Commander Kelly, and 2 security officers. No visible weapons. We don't want to frighten them. The shuttle descended through wispy clouds toward a green valley nestled between tall mountains. Below, they could see simple buildings made of wood and stone. People moved about, stopping to point up at the approaching craft. They don't appear to have any advanced technology, Kelly observed. Look at those buildings. Those farming methods. It's like looking back in time. Susan's face was grim. The Voidborn didn't just erase our history. They forced some of us back to the Stone Age. The shuttle landed in a field outside the village. A crowd gathered at a safe distance, watching with wide eyes and fearful expressions. Susan was the first to step out, her hands held open to show she carried no weapons. A man stepped forward from the crowd. He wore simple clothes and carried a wooden staff. Despite his primitive appearance, he held himself with dignity. I am Kevin Wright, leader of this village, he said in a language that was recognizably human, though the accent was strange to Susan's ears. Are you the sky people from our stories? Susan approached slowly. My name is Admiral Susan Rivera of the Earth Defense Fleet. We are humans, like you. Kevin's eyes widened. Humans? Our stories speak of other humans beyond the sky, but many believe these are just tales. As they talked, more villagers approached, their fear giving way to curiosity. Susan learned that these people called themselves the Preserved and had maintained oral histories for thousands of generations. They knew they had once come from elsewhere, though the details had become myth and legend. Our oldest stories tell of a great darkness that made us forget, Kevin explained, as he led Susan and her team through the village. Our ancestors were researchers who hid when the forgetting sickness spread. They saved what knowledge they could, but much was lost. In the center of the village stood a small building made of stone, different from the others. Inside, Kevin showed them ancient human artifacts carefully preserved. Books protected in sealed containers, simple machines, and most valuable of all, a data storage device. "We cannot use this anymore," Kevin said, handling the device with reverence. "But we keep it safe, as the ancestors instructed." Susan took the device carefully. "With your permission, we may be able to read what's on this." Kevin nodded. The ancestors said someday others would return, that together we would remember what was forgotten. Back on the shuttle, Susan's team analyzed the ancient data storage. It contained research files about the Voidborn, detailed observations of their methods and weaknesses. "They knew," Susan whispered. "Our ancestors knew what was happening and left clues for us to find." As more shuttles brought supplies and medical teams to help the village, Susan stood watching the sunset over this hidden world. For the first time since awakening, she felt something close to hope. Humanity hadn't been completely erased after all. And now, with her fleet and these survivors, they would reclaim their place among the stars. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was packed with representatives from all 27 member species. The news had spread quickly. Humans had not gone extinct, but had been deliberately undermined and erased from history. Now, humanity's ancient fleet stood ready, more powerful than any force in the current galaxy. Councillor Alan Morris stood at the center of the hall, facing the angry shouts and questions from all sides. "Order. We must have order," he called, raising his hands. Slowly, the noise died down. Alan took a deep breath. "The evidence is clear. Historical records were systematically altered approximately 300,000 years ago by the species known as the Voidborn. They deliberately sabotaged human civilization and then erased most traces of both their actions and humanity's true history." A representative from the Arcturian worlds, Paul Bennett, stood up. "What does Admiral Rivera want from us?" "Reparations. Territory. We cannot be held responsible for actions taken hundreds of thousands of years before our civilizations even existed." Alan nodded. "Admiral Rivera understands this. She does not blame the current council for what happened. However, she does request that humans be granted their rightful place in galactic affairs." This caused another uproar. Species that had settled on former human worlds feared losing their homes. Others worried about the military implications of humanity's advanced fleet suddenly entering galactic politics. In a private room adjacent to the council chamber, Susan watched the proceedings via a screen. Beside her stood Dr. Elizabeth Johnson and Kevin Wright, who had been brought to represent the rediscovered human colonies. "They fear us," Kevin said quietly, watching the angry faces in the council hall. Susan nodded. "With good reason. Our fleet is more advanced than anything they have. If we wanted to, we could force our demands." Elizabeth looked concerned. "Is that what you plan to do, Admiral?" Susan turned to face her. "No, that would make us no better than the Voidborn. We need allies, not enemies." The door opened, and Captain Gregory Daniels entered, his face troubled. "Admiral, we have a problem. Our security teams have detected unusual energy signatures near 3 of your warships. We believe someone is attempting to sabotage them." Susan's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "We're not sure, but the technology matches nothing in our current database. It's old. Very old." A chill ran down Susan's spine. The Voidborn. Gregory looked skeptical, but they disappeared 290,000 years ago. "Did they?" Susan activated her communication device. "Atlas, access the data from Kevin's village. Focus on the final research notes about the Voidborn." Atlas's voice replied immediately. According to these records, the researchers believed the Voidborn were attempting to evolve beyond physical form. They were using human genetic material in their experiments. Elizabeth gasped. "You think they succeeded? That they still exist as some kind of non-physical entities?" Susan nodded grimly. "And they wouldn't want us coming back and exposing what they did." She turned to Gregory. "Captain, we need to address the council immediately." In the main hall, the debate had grown more heated. Some representatives were calling for military action against the human fleet before it could make any demands. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Strange shadows seemed to move along the walls, though nothing cast them. Susan strode into the chamber, followed by Gregory, Elizabeth, and Kevin, counselors. She called out. All eyes turned to her. We face a common threat. The Voidborn did not disappear. They evolved, and they're here right now. The shadows on the walls grew darker, more distinct. A cold wind seemed to blow through the sealed chamber. What you see around you is what's left of the Voidborn, Susan continued, her voice steady despite the growing darkness. They exist now as energy beings without physical form, and they've been manipulating galactic affairs for hundreds of thousands of years. Paul Bennett stood, his face pale. How do we fight something we can't touch? Susan stepped to the center of the room, where the shadows were thickest. The data from the Human Research Outpost contains information on Voidborn weaknesses, but to implement it, we'll need the combined resources of both humanity's fleet and the Galactic Council. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that until recently had been strangers. We can fight among ourselves, or we can unite against those who would manipulate all of us. The choice is yours. As if in response, the shadows swirled more violently. The true enemy had finally been revealed. 3 months after the Voidborn revealed themselves in the Council chamber, ships from across the galaxy gathered near Earth. The human fleet formed the center of the massive formation. Hundreds of vessels from every Council species surrounded them in a show of unity that would have been unthinkable before. On the bridge of her flagship, Admiral Susan Rivera looked out at the gathered armada. Beside her stood Counselor Alan Morris, Captain Gregory Daniels, and Kevin Wright, now officially recognized as the representative of the recovered human colonies. All ships report ready, Admiral, Commander Kelly said from his station. Susan nodded. Begin the sequence. Throughout the fleet, specially designed energy emitters powered up. Based on the research recovered from Kevin's village, these devices would force the Voidborn back into physical form, making them vulnerable. Energy field at 60% and rising, reported the science officer. The space ahead of them shimmered as if heated. Dark shapes began to form, twisting, struggling against the energy net being cast around them. They're fighting it. Alan observed, his voice tense. Susan's face remained calm. Increase power to the emitters. All ships, hold formation. The shadow shapes grew more solid. What emerged looked nothing like any species in the galaxy. Twisted forms of darkness and light, neither fully physical nor fully energy. We are eternal. A voice echoed through all communication channels. We have guided the galaxy for hundreds of thousands of years. We have shaped civilization itself. You've manipulated and lied, Susan replied. You tried to erase an entire species because you feared them. Humans were dangerous, the voice continued. Aggressive. Expanding too quickly. We did what was necessary for galactic stability. Kevin stepped forward. You had no right to make that choice for us. The Voidborn shapes pulsed with anger. Several Council ships reported energy drains as the creatures attempted to disable their systems. Hold steady, Susan ordered. Phase 2. Now. From Earth's surface, a massive energy beam shot upward. Similar beams fired from other recovered human worlds. The ancient defense network, hidden for so long, was now working in reverse, not to protect humans from outside threats, but to trap the Voidborn in their newly physical form. It's working, Gregory said, watching the sensor readings. They're becoming fully corporeal. The shadow creatures writhed as they solidified completely. Now visible to all, they resembled giant dark clouds with glowing cores. Final phase, Susan ordered. All ships target the cores and fire. The combined firepower of the Human Council fleet lanced out, striking the Voidborn cores. One by one, the creatures collapsed in on themselves, their forms dissolving not into energy this time, but into nothingness. When it was over, Susan let out a long breath. Scan for any remaining energy signatures. After a tense minute, the science officer reported, "All clear, Admiral." No voidborne signatures detected anywhere in range. A cheer went up throughout the fleet. Thousands of years of manipulation had finally ended. 3 weeks later, Susan stood in the rebuilt council chamber. The room was packed with representatives from all species, including the newly admitted human delegation. Kevin Wright stood proudly as the first human counselor in 470,000 years. Counselor Allen stepped to the center of the room. Today marks a new beginning for our galaxy. The signing of the Unity Accord welcomes humanity back to galactic society and establishes new protocols to ensure no species can ever be erased from history again. Susan watched as Kevin signed the document on behalf of humanity. Her thoughts turned to the future. The human fleet would now serve as the core of a united galactic defense force. The recovered colonies would be given the technology and support needed to rebuild. And Earth, humanity's birthplace, would once again become a center of human culture and activity. As the ceremony concluded, Susan spoke quietly to Elizabeth Johnson, who had become a close friend during these events. "What will you do now, Admiral?" Elizabeth asked. Susan smiled for the first time in a very long time. "Learn about this new galaxy, help our colonies rebuild, and make sure we never need the Lazarus Protocol again." She looked around at the diverse faces in the chamber, humans standing side by side with dozens of alien species. "But first, I think humanity has a lot of catching up to do." Outside the chamber windows, the ancient fleet that had roared to life and shocked the Galactic Council now floated peacefully alongside ships from across the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as protectors of a new unified future.